Welcome everyone to Women of Wisdom. Today we are fortunate enough to have Tori out of Canada. And Tori's going to talk about her book, which I have not read yet. Her book looks fascinating me. And so I approached her on doing this interview and she kindly enough agreed. So welcome, Tori.
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Hi. And my first question for you is, what is the baseline of your writing?
The baseline, like the inspiration for it,
Yes.
is there's a little town that we live nearby. It's called Cobalt, and I had lived near Cobalt. Well, I shouldn't say nearby for us right now. It's about an hour and a half south of where I live in Kirkland Lake. But when I was growing up, I lived next door to Cobalt. It used to be the silver capital of Canada. It used to be full of mines and mining, and it was a very rough community. And because in the early 20th century they mined under the town as well as around it, it's riddled with tunnels. And after the mining kind of fell away, after the price of silver dropped, some of the tunnels began to deteriorate. And one day in the late 1980s, I think it was around 87, one of the streets in Cobalt, the main streets, collapsed. Big hole in it about the size of a car, or big enough to swallow a car. And so they had to send in engineers and investigators to figure out what was going wrong with the tunnels. And while the engineers were inspecting, the town took advantage of this great big hole and put up billboards and called it the world's largest pothole. So that was cool. Yeah, it was really neat.
Wow.
They fixed it. They reinforced the mines, so the town is safe again, and has been safe for the last 20-odd years. But I always remembered that. And so when I was on maternity leave with my daughter and living an hour and a half away and thinking about that, I kept thinking, what if something else had caused that road to collapse? What if it hadn't been just an old mine that had gone past its date? What if there was a creature that was trapped down there and was trying to get out? And what kind of creature would get trapped in a tunnel in a mine? Well, vampire. And I love vampires.
Yeah.
So I started to think about that and work with that. And it took me 7 years to pull it all together.
Wow.
Between one thing and another, but I finally got it done, and I'm really happy with what's happened so far. Yeah.
And my next question is, who's your favorite character in your work?
Oh, definitely my evil vampire, Malcolm Desaad. He's malevolent. He's just evil, and he's honest about it. He doesn't hide. He doesn't try to be anything other than his evil, bloodthirsty, sexual self. He enjoys the good things in life. He's been denied those good things for a very long time, hiding from vampire hunters and kind of shunted to the edges of society. So now he's after being trapped underground for a year, having his plans put off, he's definitely full steam ahead. And he can change. He changes, not personality, but he can go from being grungy and gross and dirty to being quite gallant and sexy and handsome very quickly. And he also, like the vampires in 30 Days of Night and in The Lost Boys and in Daybreakers, when he goes to feed, his features change. He gets kind of demonic features like his eyebrows and his face and his fangs and his fingernails. And I really like that. I like the idea of the true nature coming forward.
Isn't that interesting? That that being said, you gripped my attention as you were giving that description. I'm fascinated by this vampire book, and I don't usually like vampire books, but this one I'm going to have to read myself because I am just fascinated by that description. And I'm going to tell everyone, if you see Tori looking out the door, that's because we have kids involved today. So if Tori's not only paying attention to me, she's paying attention to her kids. So that's just a side. That's just a side note.
Yeah, I have a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Oh boy! Oh boy!
Yeah.
So And as we talked about before, you guys, I am a teacher, so I pretty much know about keeping kids entertained and keeping kids on their toes, or they keep us on their toes. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's if you see, those of you who watch this YouTube video, if you see Tori looking out the other direction, that's
It's a child, yeah.
it's
And I
a
have my dog
child.
here.
It's
This is
a
Skittles
child.
on my lap here too.
It's
Skittles
a
the dog.
child, and we have dogs and
Yeah. It's
kids,
busy.
and so life. We have life.
Yeah. Which
So
is why we like fiction, isn't it? It's like we like to the fiction because it takes us away just for a little while so we can have that R&R before we
yeah,
get back to it.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm actually working on a YA novel, my young adult novel myself. So that's
Terrific.
always that's always interesting. And so my next question is: Do you find that people now understand you more than when you were growing up?
No, not really.
No,
um
not really.
No, I think people have always tended to call me weird or eccentric, sometimes less kindly, a bit of a freak, because I have so many interests that kind of contradict each other. I love the paranormal, but I also love Victoriana. I love the 19th century, and I love the future. I love science fiction and fantasy. So I have a lot of interests that kind of cross each other, and people look at me and say, "Really? I would never expect that." And Also, my parents raised me as Anglican. So throughout my childhood, I was Anglican. And then when I was in my teens, or starting in adolescence, going into my teens, I needed a different way to express my spirituality. So I ended up in university becoming a Wiccan. And so I know some of my relatives, not a lot, but some
Oh
of them still
my
have a hard time
God! Oh my
understanding
God!
that.
Well, I am developed slash out of the box Catholic now, and
Okay.
so I was raised Catholic, and a
Hmm.
lot of people have. I also do alternative medicine, which is a no-no in Catholic religion, and so a lot of people have a hard time understanding me as far as my Catholicism, but when when I say I do alternative medicine for my own body,
Yes.
they go, "Okay, she's Catholic, but she's doing alternative medicine." So I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So
It's
do you do you practice? How would one pronounce? Is
Wicca.
it Wiccan or Wicca?
Wiccan. I am Wiccan, and I practice Wicca, and I also there's my daughter. Hi, Bridget.
Yes.
I also I practice witchcraft, and they're not the same thing. They're different. They're connected, but they're different. You can be Wiccan and not do witchcraft, or you can be a witch and not do Wicca. The idea of Wicca is that you're looking at the universe, you're looking at the world as having male and female energies, and you're basically acknowledging those energies, and you can call them the goddess and the god, or you can use a pantheon from most pre-Christian religions. Like you can go with Egyptian gods and goddesses, or you can go Celtic, or you can go Indian. But the idea is that Wiccans kind of believe that everybody's right, that everybody has a different way to express the same spiritual truth, and that we should respect that, and that there should also be more honor done to the other living things of the world that other people forget about, that everything has an energy to it to be respected. Witches don't necessarily have to practice that. Witches can simply tap into the universal energy by casting spells, and they're a lot like prayers. Like when somebody blows their birthday candles out, that's magic. When you some of the kids around here will, if for a snow day, they'll wear their pajamas inside out, and that's sympathetic magic. You're sending your wish out into the world saying, please make this happen. And that's positive. So a lot of people, when they think witch, they think immediately evil and hag and all those dark things. And it's not what it
But
is.
it isn't.
That's
It
No,
is.
and so the witch in my story is she's like that. She's very positive. She's Wiccan and she's a witch. And she now the magic in the story is Hollywoodized. It's not what could really happen in life. It's what I wish could happen. I'd like to be able to do telekinesis and be psychic, and I'm not. And I don't know that there's any proof that anybody could be. But imagine if we could. So
Yes.
that's one of the things I like to explore in that. And so when I was growing up, I grew up in the Anglican Church, which is kind of a wannabe Catholic in some ways. And when I switched, not switched, found my way to Wicca in my university years, like I said, a lot of my family and some of my friends had a hard time understanding why. And some of them said to me, "We already thought you were." You know, like some of my friends were surprised that I hadn't gotten to that sooner. So I think I was always on that direction, going there. And
Wow.
I feel like I feel like there. When I was writing this, I wanted a book that expressed that positivity because we don't see that a whole lot. You see movies like Practical Magic in which the witches are positive. There's no devil. They're doing things to help people. But then you see movies like The Craft where it's all about power and who's got it and who wants it, and these girls try to hurt each other. And I enjoy it. It's a great fiction movie, but it's not the impression that a lot of Wiccans want people to have, you know? So I wanted to write something that would be acknowledging the good things about my faith
Well,
and vampires.
you're doing your face clown. I didn't realize you were Wiccan, and this is the first Wiccan I have actually met.
Oh
So
wow!
there we go. There we
Yeah.
go. The new learning experience for everything. And that leads me to my next question. I'm
Hmm.
going to skip a question here and then come back to it.
Sure.
What's your deepest regret?
My deepest regret, and I had to think about this one, is not getting treated for my mental illnesses earlier in my life.
Oh boy.
I have chronic depression and anxiety to the point where it has been pretty debilitating in the past. Um, and there were times in my 20s or even in my teens where I would have been a lot more healthy if I'd gotten treatment. I would have been happier. I spent most of my 20s pretty miserable and not knowing that there was something wrong with that. And I would have enjoyed my babies probably a bit more if I'd gotten the treatment that I needed at the time, and I didn't know. So I knew when I was 16-ish that I had seasonal affective disorder. I knew that the wintertime, the darkness was affecting me. But it wasn't until I was in my 20s and I was suicidal a few times. I went through some really dark times going through school, and I didn't know that I could get help. And so it wasn't until I have two children, but I've been pregnant 4 times, and it wasn't until losing the second baby that I finally got the help that I needed to be healthy and to be, if not deliriously happy, then able to function. You know, so I've been on
Oh my.
antidepressants for about 8 years, 9 years. Yeah.
And are you through this book now speaking, raising awareness about clinical depression? I hate to bring it up, but
Not yet.
since
No, not yet. None of my characters experience direct depression. They go through their highs and lows, but I haven't acknowledged it because that's not yet something I'm ready to write about. Because even sometimes talking about it can be a trigger. I'm okay right now, but there are other things going on in the books like loss and insecurity and bullying that and the effect of bullying on adults. Like when you grow up with being mistreated and it's never resolved, how does that affect you as an adult? That gets addressed in the book. And addiction. I've never been addicted to anything, but I think that with vampires there's something of an addiction there. And there's also I wanted to have them look at abusive relationships. I think that in vampirism there's a bit of the balance is always uneven. So
exactly.
I haven't got around to the depression part yet, but the characters have enough to deal with.
The characters have enough to deal with,
Yeah.
and again, I want people to open up on this show, so I'm happy that you opened up to me about what you're going through and how lighting affects you. And here's an extra question that I didn't put in notes. Is writing a, a therapeutic thing for you?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I agree with
Um,
you on that. I definitely agree with you on that.
yeah. I have a bit of a cold. I'm just gonna grab a Kleenex.
Oh, jeez. Life,
It hit me
life,
yesterday.
life,
I'm
gold
trying to be
life.
here.
So,
Yeah. No, I
um,
find that when I'm writing, being able to go over things that made huge impressions on me in the past, whether when I was a kid or in other years, being able to express it in other characters' words, it is very relieving. It's cathartic.
yes.
Yeah.
Um, and that is that is a perfect segue to my next question. Do you ever base characters off people you know?
Yeah. Yes and no. I have a few characters that I base directly off of people in my life. Grant Michaels, my hero in the book, is actually he's based directly off my husband. Well, not directly. There are some differences, but
Yeah, well,
a lot of his personality is my husband's personality. So when I'm stuck for what Grant is going to say next, what would my husband say? What would
yes,
Mark say
yes.
next? And,
Well, well, Mark is a very lucky guy to have the hero in the book be based off him. And
yeah,
that being said, to throw it back to my book for 2 minutes, my best friend is in my YA novel, and she's tickled pink about it, and she's very lucky to be my best friend, not only in real life, but be my best friend in the YA novel.
that's lovely. That's wonderful. Well, I did that. My Raven's best friend, her name is Andrea, and she has blonde curly hair and she's tall. And Raven is quite short and redheaded. But Raven's friend Andrea is based on very much based on my childhood best friend Crystal, and I changed the names because it gives me a little more freedom. But that's who it is basically.
The,
And
does your best friend Crystal know that she's mentioned in one of your books?
she knows, and she hasn't had time to read Wind and Shadow yet, but she read the prequel, and she's referred to by name in that one, although it's a different character. But it's so basically she has like 1.5 based on her, and she was very flattered. She was very pleased, and I like to throw in those little shout outs. Make reference to another one of my friends by making them into a crotchety old neighbor who's just a minor character.
Oh,
Um,
geez. Oh,
yeah,
geez. Well, that's one way to do it.
yeah.
And um and so what is your latest book project?
I'm editing the second book in the trilogy, which is called Blood and Fire, and it's coming out in February. So,
Well, congratulations for that. And
thank you.
after your book release of that, I want you back on
Okay,
the show to
that's a
talk
deal.
about your book release and just ramp up PR for that and
For
just
sure.
make it so special. I have another person who just released a book this week who's actually coming on my show tomorrow to do PR with me, and so
Terrific. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And then the third one I'm working on right now. I'm halfway through the final book in the series, and it's supposed to come out in June, I think. So I'm going to be talking about that one too. And it's really funny because it's not your typical paranormal romance. And I know a lot of people say that. Mine really isn't. Like the characters do not do what you'd normally expect them to do in a paranormal romance. And I had a reviewer who was mad, who got really upset that the characters didn't do what
really, really,
expected.
that's interesting. That
Yeah.
is so interesting.
So in book
And
two, they get some relief. I'm pretty hard on them in book two that things start to look up, and then in book three, they have more challenges. But there will be a happily ever after. So no matter how bad things get, there will be a good ending for everything.
and that's a perfect segue to my next question. What is
Sure.
your favorite thing to write about?
Um, I wrote down a few ideas about that, and I love writing about magic and ghosts and vampires, all those extraordinary things about our life that make us shiver and make us sit up and take notice. But I also love to write about gross things, horrible things, things that make people
Agree.
go ah, that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've always been
Um. Yeah.
like to
Wh-
provoke a reaction.
yeah. Where is your favorite place to write? Where do you find your most creative juices? Obviously not with kids doing it while you're trying to do an interview. Obviously the kids have to go away when you're
Yeah.
writing because you can't be mom. You have to be author. But where do you find the most creative juices coming out of you?
In the summertime, it's outside in my backyard.
Ah,
I have a hammock. I have some lawn chairs, and last summer my husband found at a yard sale a brand new sun shelter, a nice gazebo that he put up for
oh
me.
boy.
Yeah, so I
Oh
love
boy.
sitting out
So
there. It's
sitting
perfect.
outside,
Yeah,
writing away on your laptop. Oh boy.
yeah,
That sounds interesting. And of
it's
course,
lovely.
writing about vampires outside.
Yeah.
God, I'm surprised the vampires don't come up behind you.
Well, it's
Uh,
daylight, right? So unless they
yeah,
sparkle,
yeah,
they're not
yeah.
going to be able to come
No,
out. But
they're
and
not
then
going to be
live in the
able to come out. No, exactly.
no, unless
Exactly.
it's Twilight, but I don't write Twilight type books. Although I like to think of
No, you don't like Twilight type books.
I
Like,
love it. I love Twilight, but at the same time, I can see the critique of it, so I kind of feel like I'm writing a response to Twilight a little bit, like I'm writing an alternative to Twilight. But then, we only have about 4 hours of sunshine right now. We're in the really dark time of the year because we're so far north, and I can't get to my hammock, and it's cold out. So my second favorite place is the couch in my living room. That's usually the kids are in bed, hubby goes to bed, and I will stay up happily and way past my bedtime writing.
way past you that time.
Yeah.
Good, good, good. And so, where I know we talked about this before the interview, but where are you exactly based in Canada?
I'm in Kirkland Lake, which is about 8 hours north of Toronto, 8 or 9 hours, depending on how fast you drive. And so we're about an hour and a half away from Quebec. I'm close to the border with
Okay,
Quebec,
so
and
you're not as you're not as close to Muskoka as I thought you were.
no, I'm from Muskoka. It's about 5 hours.
Okay,
Yeah,
from Muskoka it's about 5 hours.
yeah. And whatever. Here's a good way to think of it. Whatever weather Minnesota gets, we're likely to get the same thing a couple days later. We're kind of
Okay,
on.
I'm sorry to laugh, but that's a terrific, terrific. Um, that's a terrific analogy, and so and a lot of people don't understand how kind Canadians are, how kind, how bend over backwards Canadians are, and
Thank you.
that's my perception of spending half my life. I also spent half my life in the Bahamas too,
Oh,
and so, but
nice.
I do have connections in Canada still, and so people tend to forget that Canadians are very nice, nicer than U.S. have forgot.
Well, you know what? It's lovely to have that impression. I have heard that from people. It's nice, but I went to visit my friend Tara. Tara Fox Hall is another writer. She's a good friend of mine, and I've met with her the first time. We've been friends for 2 years, pen pals online, and I met her for the first time this past June in New York State, where she lives. She took me to Sylvan Beach, and I hung out with her for a weekend. And the people there were so generous. It was a really lovely place to have a little vacation. So I think that there's all kinds of people everywhere, but it's lovely of you to say thank you.
Ah, well, it's also lovely of me to say that Canadians have strong ass personalities, and I'm partially Canadian, so I know about the strong ass personalities. We're damned and determined. We're we're fairly strong. We know what we want. And
Yes.
I can see that in your own personality via Skype. I mean, we know what we want. And so that leads me to my next question. Do you ever physically dream about your work?
Not while I'm writing it. No. I find that while I'm working on these things, I think a lot about them during the daytime. And sometimes I drift away from what I'm supposed to be doing, thinking about the
Oh,
characters and what's going to happen
yeah.
next. And sometimes I'll dream up something and it will become a novel or a short story. Like I'll come up with something and I'll wake up and if I'm lucky, I'll write it down. And if I don't write it down right away, then I'll maybe remember it later. But I don't dream about it while I'm working on it. It just tends to be a daytime thing.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And what a lot of people don't know um, about the Beautiful My Heroes is my YA novel. It's because it had to be pushed back and because life got in the way. The YA novel has now turned into something of a dream of mine, and it's turned into this huge thing about respecting people and
Right.
respecting others and respecting not necessarily the environment, but in respecting people. And I am giving a portion of the sales to a non-profit here in the U.S. And so this book has now turned into a thing of respect.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
and this book, my book, has now turned into a little bit of a kind monster. Not to say that my other book, my memoir, I Win, isn't a kind monster, but this book is more of the gentler side of me because it's geared towards the teen set, and I can tell by your books and your personality that these books are the more gentler side of the Wiccan personality because you wanna raise people's consciousness that there are
Yeah,
good Wiccans out there.
for sure. And last year, I taught a writer's craft class. And one of the things that we did as a class was National Novel Writing Month. And the students wrote novels along with me. We all wrote together for the month of November. And when they were done, they gave me the best bits and like their best excerpts. And I put them all together into an anthology. And we put it on Amazon. And we said that all the money that we raised by selling it would go toward sick kids, Toronto Sick Kids Hospital.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we haven't sold a whole lot. We haven't done a lot of fundraising because the class ended and I had to move on and do other things. So we learned a lot from it, though. It was a good experience. And at least the kids have their copies and they're in the library and it's still on Amazon. So anytime I get a royalty, if I ever get a royalty, then that will go to helping sick kids.
If you get royalty from that, if, honey, that's going to change via Women of Wisdom. If I'm going to I'm going to let you go on about that anthology because as I said, I'm partially Canadian, and me having cerebral palsy, sick kids is near and dear to my heart, even though I never got treated up there. But I am going to change that for you. If
Thank you.
if it's not an answer anymore, if I ever get a royalty, honey, you will get royalties.
Thank you. I'm going to pull up the cover. It's on my iPad here. I'll show you what it looks like. If I can find it here. Hang on really quickly. It's in the iBooks. And I really appreciate that. Thank you. And the kids had a great time writing it, too. Just a sec. I don't want that. And my daughter's now lying on my lap in place of the dog.
That's okay. That's okay. That's okay.
Say hi.
Definitely okay.
So this
That's a
book
lot
that
to say.
my students did, it's called Many Voices, and I'm just trying to find the cover image here. Um, why won't it let me show the cover? So weird.
Technology, technology.
Yeah. Um, come on, show me the cover.
Tech,
Oh, okay. Maybe if I pull up the proof copy, then oh, there we go. Okay, don't lose the cover. That's what it's. There's the cover
oh
there.
my God, it's beautiful. It's
Thank you.
beautiful. And
Yeah.
I am going to promote many voices as well. And I don't have your website, but when you see this video on YouTube, you can always send it back to me, and I'll edit in the capture on YouTube your website and links
Terrific.
to your books.
Thank you.
So, that being said, who is your books? Not many voices necessarily, but the vampire series best suited for?
Adults. Oh, definitely adults.
Oh,
18 plus. Fans of romance. I mean, it's 18 plus because there's sexual
yeah,
content in it. There's
yeah.
swearing in it. There's
Yep,
violence.
yep.
It's a battle against good and evil, and it doesn't shy away. So it's for anybody who enjoys vampires, who enjoys witches, thrillers, horror. And I feel like some of it's an homage to Stephen King and Rice, the writers who go gritty. So it does have a lot of gritty moments in it, but it also has some very sweet and poignant moments. So it's because one of my favorite writers is Nora Roberts, and another is Diana Gabaldon. So I kind of took some of my cues from them as well. So there are some sweet parts, but there are some really rough parts in there as well.
And so, where can people find your books?
For a print copy, you have to go to the well, not have to. The best is to go to the publisher, Mélange Books, and that's online. It's also available on Amazon, and I've seen it on Smashwords for other formats of ebook beyond Kindle, and I saw it on Barnes and Noble as well. So it's most ebook sites now people can purchase it.
Okay, most ebook sites people can
Yeah, and for a
purchase
print,
it.
yeah, for a print copy, your best bet is I think that you can get them through Amazon, but if you can go to the publisher's site, Melange Books, they it's wonderful.
And it's Melon's Books CA, not .com.
No, .com. It's actually an American company, and so
Okay, okay.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
not CA. And for those people who think I'm a little bit nuts by saying CA, that's how they do it up in Canada.
yeah.
They land up not using .com. So
That's right.
for those people who are watching this YouTube who think I'm a little bit nuts by saying CA at the end of websites, um, that's how they do it up in Canada.
That's right. Yeah.
And so, do you ever think about doing a children's book based on Wiccan?
Yeah. Oh, I've thought about it for a while, but I haven't had a plot come to me just yet. I've seen some really nice books done by fellow Wiccans. I have a couple of them, and so there's some really nice picture books out there. I would like to do also a young adult novel, and when I do, I'll be doing a different pen name. I write under a pen name because it helps me to separate my teaching from my writing, and it helps me to feel more creative. I found that I feel better when I'm writing under my pen name as opposed to my legal name. So I will choose a different one when I'm writing for children and writing for young adults.
Well, when you publish both of the two separate books, you have a supporter in the U.S. that is a teacher and knows about independent and small house publishing, and I'm happy to support you and have you back on Women of Wisdom, and I'm happy to do PR for you, and it was lovely talking to you,
Thank you.
and I hope to see you again in the future.
For sure, definitely. Thank you for having me on Women of
Th-
Wisdom.
Thank you.